Looks like it's going to be a pretty easy game, man.
You wish. You really wish.
The gaming space in India is as gendered as it gets. The global gaming community is an extremely sexist community.
I don't think you'd deny it that if it were a girl instead, she'd be introduced to a doll or, different other games to play with offline. And the way she'd be brought up would be very different. So, with the recent gaming culture is that's changing, not just on the basis of income, but it doesn't depend on what gender you belong to anymore. You will get to be a part of the, gaming culture. Is that change happening?
Okay. If you don't mind, I'll answer this one first. There's no denying that fact. What you're telling is right. Correct. The gaming space in India is as gendered as it gets. So during my doctoral dissertation, for example, I was struggling to find women gamers. And even when I did find them, I was struggling to find people who are willing to go on record to say that they play video games. So that gendered gaming space that exists in our minds also exists in those game environments. The amount of abuse, the amount of frustration, the amount of torture that women players who identify that they are women players online receive is on an entirely different level. Can you imagine, if there's a woman player in a lobby in a multiplayer game who's beaten a bunch of male players, can you imagine the kind of vitriol or the kind of comments that she's going to receive? All we need to do is probably look at women who stream video games, for example. Just look at the kind of comments they get. Correct? I cannot emphasize this more. The global gaming community is an extremely sexist community. And that's why, movements like the Gamergate or what Anita Sarkeesian is trying to do is, just one step of a journey that's probably extremely infinitely long in that case. And it's not only among the players, right? It's also among the content. You look at the way the women characters are created, the way they are dressed, their purpose within the game. It's only in the last decade that we have begun to, once people have started calling for it, that we have begun to receive strong women characters in video games. Prior to that, yes, apart from Lara Croft, we couldn't really think of anyone. And Lara Croft worked because not of what she did in games, but the way she was dressed, for example. And there's no denying that fact. So, if I was a woman growing up in India, I'm pretty sure, no matter how liberal I think my parents are, but I'm pretty sure, yes, this is probably not a path I would have been able to carve for myself. And you're extremely right. So, it is a gendered gaming space. Even the kind of content available is extremely problematic. And the industry as such has to work towards that neutrality in a sense. And even our perceptions of that has to change. So, while a lot of women now play video games and we have data for it, but a lot of it is still what is loosely put under the umbrella, the casual gamer. So, the assumption that the industry thinks Candy Crush makes more money because 13-year-old girls and 15-year-old girls are willing to play Candy Crush is something we need to change. So if we look at it as a leisure time activity where minds have to engage and strategy has to be built, how is it gender skewed in any way? It should not be, right? But I guess those environments are not as welcoming or not as neutral as we think they are. So, yeah.
Do you think violence in video games is desensitizing people towards violence in real life?
Would you like to elaborate on that a little?
So, there's a take, for example, games like PUBG or even Counter-Strike, where, people are, an aspect of the gaming involves shooting at your opponents, etc. So, while you're doing that, does it sort of make you immune when you see someone being shot in real life or, a bloody person you see on the road, etc.?
See, that's the thing. So, there are a couple of ways to look at this. Ideally, it should not. Because the fact that, what's happening in video games, for the longest time, most players know that it is virtual. And when they actually see it in real life, it's a completely different experience. So while most of us, who play video games think we are expert shooters when it comes to carrying a gun, holding an actual gun and firing a bullet, the recoil is something we could probably never prepared for. Okay, so ideally it should not. But this does not mean our beliefs are not desensitized. Those are happening considerably. So, like for example, if you take somebody like Prince Harry, right? So when he was told that his military service was to happen in Iraq, and I believe he was a gunner on a helicopter, and he was like, it's almost like playing Call of Duty. Of course it's not, right? But how could you say that? American Army has known to recruit young people to join the armed forces by asking them if they like to play video games, and if they like to play video games, joining the army is considered to be similar, which is again very problematic. ISIS, for some level, as you were pointing out earlier, has also done that. So I guess we are doing a poor job by not defining, a game at the end of the day is still a game. Correct? No matter how much I argue and researchers like me argue that, it can be equated to reality, deaths in a game are not real deaths in life, or violence in games is not real violence in life. But if at some point, correct, that boundary breaks within the player's understanding, then we are in deep trouble. We strongly believe that video games, or entertainment for that matter, works because we believe it is fictional. It is make-believe. It is impossible to accept that, somebody could carry a gun and gun down 50,000 people in real life. Correct, but we are seeing that boundary being broken.
But isn't a scenario that's portrayed in a certain game not a sort of simulation? Can't we call it a simulation? So someone who's, probably becomes very good at shooting or in a certain violent game, does that person develop a tendency to be better at it?
So what the use of the word simulation there is very right. It's precise. So most games try for the most realistic recreation.
And if the person actually gets better at it, that's very problematic for the society at large, right?
Correct. And that's where the problem kind of arises. So increasing research, for example, from Formula 1 simulators, for example, talks about how gamers who play Formula 1 and who do the simulation are almost as good as actual Formula 1 drivers when it comes, their timings are close. Now, if we are to try and extrapolate this data to exactly what you're saying, yes, I guess in effect, somebody who's really good at first-person shooters and understands how actual, fire weapons, firearms work, for that matter, might be actually, in a way, getting better at causing that kind of damage. But I strongly still believe, at least the hope is that players of games are players with conscience, who understand that, the two are radically different things. And while most attacks by lone gunmen in the West are considered and connected to video games on some level, this is something, humanity has done for a very long time. Before video games, it used to be films. Before films, it used to be television. Before television, it used to be, theatre and all of that. We have blamed other media forms for violence. But even when none of them were there, humanity itself has had a very violent past, right? So I guess the two things we cannot separate. But what you're telling is right. It's problematic. And we should also be aware, like in the kind of games we seek, in the kind of games we want to play, as players I'm talking here probably, is to try and find newer experiences which are not only violent in nature. So for every GTA 5 or every Call of Duty, there are also games like, Sea of Shadows or, Flower, or if not Journey for that matter, which have nothing to do with violence, which are just pure experience bliss, or, sports simulators for that matter, which do not cause this kind of at least conflict of sorts. Yeah.
So we discussed hegemonic masculinity in short a while back. So talking about movements like pink games, which basically came up so that women gamers could be targeted. Is that really a solution to get more women gamers on board, or is that a very safe way of still targeting the main audience as the alpha males, still creating video games for them and helping still maintain a society where most people would prefer, like a male would prefer to go online, pretend to be a female character, look appealing, so that he gets support from other male players. I mean, that kind of scenario is not going to disappear if you just say, this game is for a female, instead of creating a new game where you say it's very gender neutral. We are going to target both, audience.
Yeah. What you're telling is right. See, as I keep telling, right, the global gaming space is extremely gendered, and hegemonic masculinity is huge. So Professor Roy from communication, right? So he works a lot with hegemonic masculinity in games. So let's take the archetypal creation of, a video game protagonist. In most games, it is a guy, preferably white guy, extremely ripped, huge muscles, carrying a gun or something which is extremely difficult to carry. And, there's that alpha male image that you keep talking about. And this, on some level, must connect to the fact that the stereotyped gamer, at least the way a decade ago the gaming industry used to view it, the person for whom all video games were being made was a white Western teenager living in a basement. So all content was being made to reinforce that alpha male image in that person's mind. So now these options are being challenged. For the first time, we are seeing strong women characters come in games who actually make decisions, who actually are responsible for the way games run. So in 2019 alone, one of the best games this year was Control, which had this very strong woman character who kind of redefines how the game works. So similarly, there was Horizon Zero Dawn. But you're right. The need to develop content that is gender neutral, especially for video games, is now more than ever. Okay? To make it seem that this is entertainment that's available for everybody is probably the step. So things like ping games would have probably never come if we would have never made male stereotyped games to begin with. Correct? So there is a massive skew there. And ping games, I think, though heavily critiqued, heavily criticized, was only trying to right the balance in some. It could not. But yeah. So I guess awareness is one, acceptance is another, and most importantly the belief that, maybe the male gamers also now need more differentiated content is important. So if gamers actually demand for better content, it will change. So we have seen that happen now. So I hope it continues.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.